The ground starts shaking long before anyone sees a single plane. South of St. Lo, on July 25, 1944, the horizon simply vanishes, replaced by a wall of smoke and fire that moves toward the German lines like a living thing. 1,495 heavy bombers are running in staggered waves, and they drop 4,406 tons of munitions onto a strip of Normandy countryside only 7,000 yards long. The noise is beyond anything the men have ever heard because it isn't just sound anymore. It is physical pressure that rewrites everything in its path. Colonel Fritz Ziegelmann is sitting at his command post when the first reports begin to trickle in. What he hears tells him something no tactical map could ever show, which is that the line his division bled to hold for 6 weeks isn't just being attacked, it is being erased from the earth. The 352nd Infantry Division was not some unit thrown together at the last minute. It was a force built with a very specific purpose. Formed in November of 1943 for the defense of Normandy, the 352nd existed to hold the coast and the hedgerows until the German army could push the Allies back into the sea. The division consisted of 3 grenadier regiments and an artillery regiment, along with all the supporting units needed to make a full combat division. This was a massive force assembled with one strategic idea in mind, and for a while, the plan actually worked. On June 6, 1944, the 352nd held Omaha Beach, while other sectors across the coast buckled and broke under the weight of the Allied landings. The men of the 352nd turned that beach into a slaughter, and the Americans who came ashore there paid an extraordinary price for every yard of sand they took. The division performed exactly as it was designed to, but as June turned into July, the hedgerow country south of St. Lo became a grinding machine. The bocage was a dense network of earthen banks and thickets that carved Normandy into 1,000 small killing grounds, and it ate formations alive on both sides of the line. Progress was measured in individual fields rather than miles, and every single attack cost the Germans men they simply could not replace. Ziegelmann served as the operations officer, the man known as the ear, which meant he was the one who held the full picture of the division's front at any given moment. Every regiment reported to him, so every gap in the line and every casualty count passed through his hands. He understood the math of the war better than almost anyone else in the sector, and by mid-July, that math was getting ugly. The division's regiments were running at skeleton strength because weeks of attrition had hollowed them out, and there were no fresh battalions coming down the road to help. The Allies held air superiority so complete that moving reinforcements in the daylight was a death sentence, so supplies only arrived at night, if they arrived at all. Then July 24th arrived, and the sky gave a final warning of what was coming. A formation of American bombers appeared over the line and dropped their payloads early, hitting their own troops and killing 156 Americans in a friendly fire disaster. The Germans couldn't fully interpret the mistake in the moment, but the sheer number of planes told Ziegelmann that something massive was being prepared. The division spent the night bracing for the blow, but they had no idea what massive actually meant. For more deep dives into military history, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. The main bombardment begins at 0938 on July 25th, and it starts with a wave of heavy bombers that seems to have no end. Fritz Ziegelmann was commanding the Panzer Lehr Division to the west, and he later described the sight of these aircraft as a mechanical conveyor belt that just kept coming and coming. This massive bombing rectangle stretches 7,000 yards long and 2,500 yards wide. Sitting directly on top of the defensive lines the 352nd has been trying to hold. Most people imagine carpet bombing as simple destruction, but the reality on the ground is the total collapse of every system that makes a military unit work. Communications are the first thing to go as the telephone wires connecting Ziegelmann's command post to his forward regiments are shredded almost instantly. Radio sets end up buried in the dirt or destroyed, and the men left to run them are often too stunned by the noise to even move. The artillery guns that were supposed to break up an American attack fall silent because the crews are dead, and the weapons are trapped under massive craters. Unit cohesion vanishes next as regiments stop acting like organized groups and turn into broken clusters of men. These soldiers are cut off from their officers and separated from each other, left with nothing to do but cling to the shaking earth while the world around them continues to explode. Ziegelmann spends those first few minutes receiving fragmented reports that offer only a partial picture of the disaster. He hears about a position being overrun or a company going silent, but as the bombing gets heavier, the reports stop coming in entirely. That silence from the front lines carries its own message because in a high-stakes operation, a dead radio usually means the position is gone. What Ziegelmann doesn't know is that 42 of those bombers actually dropped their loads on American troops by mistake. This friendly fire disaster killed 111 US soldiers and wounded nearly 500 more, including Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, who became the highest-ranking American officer to die in the war. From the German side of the dirt, the attack looks like a flawless display of coordinated annihilation that has no room for error. This perception is critical because it kills off any remaining hope for the defenders. A bombardment with visible mistakes usually suggests the attacker is fallible, which gives the defense a reason to look for a gap or a way to fight back. What Ziegelmann is watching offers no such comfort, and instead, it looks like a machine that has already decided the outcome and is now just finishing the job. He realizes in this moment that the bombing isn't just a way to prepare for an attack on the line. The line itself no longer exists as a military concept, and the Americans are preparing to move through open ground because they already know nothing will be left to stop them. The 352nd isn't being pushed back by a superior force. It is being systematically removed from the map. This realization isn't an emotional one for a man like Ziegelmann, but rather a simple matter of arithmetic. There are no reserves left to plug the holes being torn into the front, and there is no fallback line waiting to catch what is left of the division. The math hasn't worked for weeks, but now the failure is visible as the fields south of St. Lo burn and churn under the weight of the explosives. There is no longer any professional reason to pretend the situation can be saved, and the mechanism to rebuild a division in days has been destroyed in a matter of minutes. The reality of the collapse is now undeniable to everyone watching from the bunkers. The American armor begins pouring through the gaps created by the bombers, and it moves much faster than a broken defensive line can possibly react. The very thing the Germans feared most is now happening as the Breakout cracks Normandy wide open and sends Allied forces racing toward the Seine. Ziegelmann watches this disaster unfold from a command post that changed in a single morning from a hub of military direction to a collection of scattered survivors. After the war ended, Ziegelmann sat down to record the details of these days in a manuscript that covers to the end of July 1944. This document is currently held at the Bundesarchiv as a simple carbon copy with a single hand-drawn sketch, and it reads like a professional log rather than a dramatic story. It is the operational timeline of a division dying in real time, written by the one man who could see the entire collapse as it happened. He also wrote a longer analysis that frames the events not as a single bad day, but as the inevitable result of 6 weeks of constant bleeding. The 352nd had been trapped in a war of attrition against an enemy with endless air support and a supply chain that made the Wehrmacht look small by comparison. Every single day they held their ground, they spent men they could never replace and lost equipment they could never recover. The carpet bombing on July 25th didn't actually change the final outcome of the battle, but it did make the timeline impossible for the German command to ignore any longer. This perspective is what sets Ziegelmann's account apart from the usual after-action reports written by other German officers. Most of those documents focus on specific tactical decisions, arguing about where a regiment should have been placed or if a counterattack could have bought more time. Ziegelmann zooms out to show the bigger picture of a professional soldier, recognizing that the strategic equation had already been solved. The answer was determined weeks before the first bomber arrived over the target, and July 25th was just the moment the math became impossible to argue with. By the time the smoke finally clears from the fields, the American breakout is already deep behind the lines and gaining speed. For more deep dives into military history, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. By July of 1944, the 352nd Infantry Division had been completely wiped out in the fields of Normandy, and the records in the Bundesarchiv tell the story of that destruction in cold, plain language. Ziegelmann was one of the few who made it out alive, and he spent his time after the war writing down every detail for US Army historians to ensure the world knew how the collapse felt from the inside. He watched the entire front line fall apart in real time, and his testimony became the most important source we have for understanding those final hours. While most men simply fight until they are overrun, Ziegelmann was the one who realized the end was coming before the first position even fell. For more deep dives into the battles that shaped the war, make sure you're subscribed to the channel.